I attended the Deniliquin Murray Basin Rally meeting last year when the first proposal plan was put forward. After skimming through the magnificent glossy brochure provided by the authority, I became extremely concerned that there was absolutely no mention of what would be the human cost, what effect the inception of that planned proposal would have on our farmers, their families, and in fact all members of the rural communities, including business houses, schools and support services. I stood up and voiced my concerns and pointed out that in line with my area of employment, this was a critical element that had been omitted, and it was of paramount importance for people being forced into a new area of change that they still had hope and a future. My comments were overwhelmingly endorsed by all present. I have been invited to speak today to expand on these critical concerns. I have overviewed the second basin draft proposal, and guess what? Again, there is no mention of what socio-economic impact and effects would be felt if this second draft proposal was accepted. Again, there is no such chapter or indeed any mention about the restrictions and limitations put on our people's future and the cost of their losses in health and finances. Again, no mention of how mortally wounded our vast rural communities would be if they were thrust involuntarily into such economic distress, which would in turn manifest itself into extensive social decline. This now confirms to me that either the Murray-Darling Basin Authority and federal government just don't care about what impact the proposed draft plan would have on farmers and farming communities and their futures.
Exactly.
Or two, the real socio-economic effects of the proposed draft plan are so devastating on farmers, small business and their rural communities that they would rather hush it up. It's too volatile to go there.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Or it tells me that there is a federal government party agenda that whatever new suggestions are brought up in discussions at these so-called facilitation meetings, they are always going to be overridden by the government's own preferred party agenda.
Exactly.
The Murray-Darling Basin Authority just have to look like they are interested in people's opinions and seem to be facilitating opportunity for farmers' comments. But in reality, they accept the data from the theorists, not the farmers' generational, practical and historical experience. I put it to you, gentlemen, it is obviously at least one of these, or quite probably all three. With due respect, but with great concern, may we remind you that all government representatives are put there by the people, for the people. Not to protect their own party with party agendas. Do you all agree? I'm not going to talk about mental health statistics today. Maybe it's time that I need to paint a more vivid picture of what our rural people are really going through. Every day my colleagues and I, along with many other mental health professionals, battle with complications brought on by economic hardship and prolonged stress. The 11-year drought was psychologically and financially draining on members of our rural communities, and many of our clients came for help with serious stress-related problems. Family pressures, sadly some broken relationships, many were being counselled for grief and loss. Others had to walk off their farms after seeing their animals suffer and die. Many were struggling with putting food on the table. People who always paid their bills on time were humiliated because they couldn't pay, or they would have to ask the already struggling local businesses for credit for food and fuel or seek food vouchers. Many were counselled for high anxiety, panic attacks and depression. Business houses were just hanging on, promising that if they had a bit of rain soon, it might break the drought. Sadly, there were some that used suicide as a way out.
Not allowed to talk about that.
Sadly, there were some that used suicide as a way out because they saw no future, no hope. But let me say this loud and clearly to you all. There is always better options. Suicide is not acceptable and never will be an option. If you feel that things are out of control or that you can't think positive anymore, help is out there. Go to your local doctor, your hospital, tell a family member or a friend. They will find the right sort of help and support that you need. You are all valued members of our community. We support you and we love you. My vivid picture goes on. After the drought came the trauma of the floods. Many farming families and communities came to counselling for extra support during this time, more than challenging time. Then the timber industry was shut down and many lost their businesses and their jobs. Our people have already been through these traumatic times, and now some of our rural clients are conveying to us that they are being forced into yet another unworkable situation on their farms. Farmers are saying the second MDBA draft proposal suggests that there will be not enough water, which severely restricts future farming practice, jeopardise their families' welfare, deny them their future goals of being able to make a living, and will destroy the dream of passing their farms on to their kids. It was said to me, how can you work with a government that is working against you? Many are being counselled for grief and loss. They are frustrated because they are not being included at the grassroots level of the decision making. That they are being denied by a control process the right to have a say in their future. They are also being denied the feeling of ownership on their farms and water security, thus limiting and destroying their plans for a productive and successful future. Emotional, physical and psychological health are being compromised. This can be clearly demonstrated in the following ways. Grief is the response to the loss of any significant object or person in our lives. This includes broken relationships, financial loss, job loss, loss of health, abandonment of significant life goals or dreams. Grief can take on a pathological response when it is denied, delayed or distorted. Grief is personal. It can be very isolating. If unresolved and untreated, it can lead to resentment and bitterness, a refusal to come to terms with one's feelings. Some only cope by blocking feelings with drugs or other addictions. Depression manifests itself in the pain of the loss, also in guilt, remorse, loneliness, panic and fear of the future, physical distress, sleeplessness, listlessness, and sometimes hyperactivity. Clinical depression is prolonged and involves the loss of self-esteem and self-worth. It does not respond to human warmth and comfort in the way grief-related depression does. Clinical depression may appear as a symptom of unresolved grief. By the way, families that cope best with grief and loss are open to discussion and are able and encouraged to share their thoughts and feelings with each other. So who agrees with me out there? Stand up if you agree that this is what's been going on in your family.
Absolutely. Hypocrite!
Is this a true account of the hardship that you've all been going through and still going through? Yes! I want to hear yes?
Yes!
Are you frustrated because you haven't been able to have your say?
Yes!
Do you feel the federal government and Murray-Darling Basin Authority are not representing the Australian people here and only their own agenda?
Yes!
Do you want to secure a future?
Yes!
When do you want it?
Now!
Do you want your politicians to listen to you?
Yes!
When do you want it?
Now!
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.